Let us pray. Made in your image, remind us, loving God, that we all bear a likeness to the divine. We all are creatures of your amazing creation. Help us to love ourselves for who we are and to trust that your love is unconditional. Equip us to openness and growth as we seek to understand our brothers and sisters and treat all in our midst with compassion and care. We thank you for this time together, for the wonderful wisdom Beth will share with us, and for this reminder of the tie that binds us together. We pray all this in Christ's name. Amen. I get official with the sound. Thank you so much to Amy and the Congregational Care Committee for opening up this subject of your church. I always admire those churches that take this very important topic on. I'm delighted to be here. It's a subject really near and dear to my heart. Mental health care, specifically mental illness. And I want to give you a heads up. One of my favorite sayings to my boys and to my nieces and nephews is, you do you, you be you. And I've learned with my speaking, I've been speaking for a while now, for me to be me, I don't go off the cuff as well. Part of my brain zips everywhere, and I've tried off the cuff. It is totally unorganized. You never know what you're getting. So I turn out better when I have an organized, prepared sort of message. So when you sit back, relax, and just listen. I'm passionate about mental health advocacy and educating others on what mental illness can sometimes look like. And I come to you with over 30 years experience in living with one. My whole purpose in speaking, sharing parts of my journey, is to be a significant change agent in shattering harmful stigmas that so often surround mental illness in our society, stigmas that keep people feeling shamed and isolated, and stigmas that keep people in places of dark denial, unwilling or unable to get help, and stigmas that keep people feeling void of any hope. We as a society can handle this topic. I know we can do this. We must do this, because we cannot afford the silence that is so often buried in the topic, which often creates a far sicker individual than need be. I believe 100% that mental illnesses are clinically diagnosed diseases like any other, such as diabetes, heart disease, cancer, and high blood pressure. And I'm here to bear witness and assurance that not only can people live with mental illness and survive with mental illness, when it's properly treated, they can thrive. My advocacy work has definitely become a true spiritual calling, and in full disclosure, I can assure you that had I been consulted on what calling to define to myself, I would never have chosen to be speaking out about mental illness, much less intimate details of my own. I mean, come on, who chooses this? On a whim, I first shared about 16 years ago at a Mental Health Association fundraiser. Prior to the event, other than my family and 2 close friends, I'd hidden my mental illness from everybody. So on the morning of the event, the nerves got the best of me and I threw up 3 times. And then, upon arriving at the event, I literally almost fainted when I saw the program. And right in the center, in big, bold, capital letters, it said, Beth Purdy, face of mental illness. Needless to say, for many years, I found myself balking at the calling and begging to be sharing a different kind of message. However, I eventually reached a point where I began to fully embrace and appreciate that sharing my mental illness stories was way bigger than me. That really, it wasn't even about me. I'm just the messenger. And I've come to accept that sharing my struggles with a nasty disease would be one of my callings. My first real experiences with mental illness began in college. I arrived freshman year and thrived in most areas. Like high school, I had a lot of good friends, was outgoing, enjoyed and did well in school, was a great athlete, and had a real love of life. To the outside eye, it looked like the world was my oyster, but I found myself becoming a bit teary from time to time. At age 18, I didn't know anything about mental illness and certainly didn't know what it could look like. So I just brushed it off as no big deal. During my sophomore year, the teariness was more frequent, and I casually asked for some help. But because I still didn't look like what we might envision the typical depressed person would look like, I just kept on going and thought things might settle down soon. I didn't look the part of a late teen with a mental illness, but signs were there, and looking back, I can see them. I decided to go abroad for my junior year and went to St. Andrews, Scotland. I was very excited for the new adventure, but soon after I arrived, I would feel my mind starting to slip again. But unlike before, I was no longer teary. Now, I was numb. That Christmas, I wasn't able to come home, and I ended up traveling around with a friend from my program and a friend of hers from home. They were both hardcore New Yorkers, aggressive feminists, dark, bitter, radical rebels, and it was quite a mix with my southern sweet self. Needless to say, home felt mighty far away, and I decided to just travel along by myself. I ended up in Paris. It was Christmas Eve, and I was walking around the city. At one point, I heard this beautiful music coming from a church nearby. I went in and stood at the back. It was breathtaking in its size and grandeur, and candlelight was everywhere. It was warm and cozy and peaceful, and I can remember my heart aching for the first time in months. The numbness that had kept the feelings away had lifted, and I was overcome with a flood of deep and dark emotion. Many tears started down my cheek. I stood there and let all my surroundings soak in, and I realized I was saying, I cannot do this any longer. I simply cannot keep going. I was ready to be gone and leave the pain and be at home with God in a majestically peaceful place like the church I was in right then. I felt so hopeless and helpless, and I said again, I cannot go on. I was looking at the front of the church this whole time and hadn't noticed a man holding a young little girl. She was maybe 3 or 4 years old, and they were all about 10 feet in front of me, off to the side a little bit. The man was standing facing the front of the church with his back to me, and the little girl was looking over his shoulder. All of a sudden, I met her gaze, and we just stared at each other for a few seconds. And then, with ever the slightest gentle smile and softened eyes, she rose up her hand and waved to me. I think of that little girl as my angel. She showed me that I wasn't alone, that God was with me, and that I had to keep fighting. It wasn't my time to carry it. I made it through the rest of that break and trudged on through all of the winter and spring months. But by the end of that school year, I was an empty, lifeless, soulish apparition of myself. I lived in a beautiful flat overlooking the sea, and I would sit for hours staring out the window. I heard God then. He was telling me to hang on, and that he hadn't forgotten me. He told me to trust him and keep walking, yet I felt dead. I wanted to die, and I was ready to go. By the last couple of weeks before coming home, it seemed like things were moving in slow motion. I felt hollow inside, and I was utterly exhausted. On good days, I wondered how I was going to escape from the pain, and on bad days, it was so dark and hopeless that I felt frozen in a black cloud. The school year finally ended, and I made it back to this stage where I immediately collapsed on my parents' den floor in a heaping pile of tears. All the intense and suppressed pain of the past many months was coming out, and I simply could not stop crying. I was a wreck. I was terrified, and I scared my parents to death. I couldn't get off the floor. They had never seen me like this. Where was the girl who enjoyed such a full and exciting life, who brought such life to those around her? Where was her energy, charm, and zest? Who in the world was this girl, who so clearly was not that girl, and was utterly and completely falling apart? Not knowing what to do, my parents reached out to one of our rectors at church. And after many failed attempts at finding me help, they eventually talked a psychiatrist out of retirement to see me. I'll never forget my first visit with the doctor. They found Dr. Walker. I was crying. I hadn't stopped crying ever since my heap on the den floor. And I was trying to tell him what was going on, but it was practically useless because of A, the endless tears that choked my words, and B, I hadn't a clue what was going on. So how in the world could I tell somebody else? He looked at me, with genuine kindness, compassion, and concern, and said, "It just breaks my heart to see you like this. You are miserable, hopeless, and dying inside, and you're blaming yourself for feeling that way." And my eyes narrowed and I scrunched my brow and said, "Well, who in the world else is there to blame? Of course it's my fault. Look at me. I'm disgusting and pathetic and weak." And I could not stop crying. I was also so incredibly cold. I felt frozen inside. When the mind is in pain, the body cries out. That's a quote from the movie The Godfather, and it certainly is true for me. I later learned that when your mental capacity isn't healthy, your circulatory system slows down and it's harder to get that blood pumping. And my weight is another thing that is majorly affected. For me, I can't keep it on. When I came home from Scotland, my freshman 15 and sophomore several had been added with lots of Scottish stones and water, and I had about 30 extra pounds on me. In less than a month, I lost it all. Physically, the illness eats away at me, and no matter how many layers of blankets I put on, I simply cannot get more. Dr. Walker explained how difficult it was for some people to grasp that a mental illness in their brain wasn't their fault. He talked about how very hard it is to fix something that you aren't aware is broken. You use your mind to tell yourself what you are thinking and feeling, but when your mind is ill, it affects the very same thinking and feeling and makes them unhealthy too. So without some hard work and practice, it's very difficult to fix what is broken. An unhealthy mind will have a heck of a time trying to make itself healthy. An unhealthy mind can make it hard for one to know who they really are. It can play tricks on you and create illusions and doubts and make it much harder for one to see the truth. When I'm depressed, it is nearly impossible for me to believe that anybody could actually like me or want to be around me. It's hard to feel of any value and to feel it all worthwhile. I have a strong desire to disconnect and isolate from the world around me. It's hard to even look people in the eye, and I feel like I'm walking around in public with no clothes on, and everyone is thinking that I'm a freak, especially me. For the most part, my bouts of depression have always manifested itself in intense sadness, self-loathing, shame, and embarrassment. I don't lash out at others. Instead, I take wicked stabs at myself. I lean towards being silent, even while functioning, lost in a world where no one can really touch me, and I'm too ashamed to let anybody see. Shame is a huge, enormous part of my depression, and it stems to and from everything. I have referred to it as that voice, and it is mean, it is harsh, it is bitter, cunning, and cold. It is piercing, it is bone-crushing, it is relentless, and it is evil. It will cut me to the quick and knock me to my knees. I have to use all my years of counseling and experience to recognize that unhealthy thoughts as just that, unhealthy, and not fall into the trap of believing they are real. And that is hard to do. Dr. Walker was the first person to tell me that the mental illness, was a real disease and that I wasn't the cause of it. And while I was curious about that notion, in no way did I believe it. I hated myself back then and hated being so weak and unable to pull myself up from the bootstraps and be a trooper. For certain, I took the medicines he prescribed and I did the counseling he suggested, and I definitely tried really hard to get better because I so wanted to be healthy. I wanted to be okay. I wanted to be well. But deep down, I was so incredibly ashamed, and no matter how much I tried to tell myself it wasn't my fault, that's exactly what I felt. So I just shoved it under the rug, pushed it out of my mind, and ignored the whole problem. But it was like putting a Band-Aid on a deep, deep wound that would only spill over again in a matter of time. I coasted on for many years, 9 to be exact, and over those 9 years, I experienced a handful of smaller depressive episodes. And while I did see a couple of different doctors along the way, boy, can it be hard to find a good doctor. I remember going into one man's office and leaving thinking, you are far crazier than I am. But I didn't really look into them to episodes. I just treated them as phases and tried to go on living. I definitely didn't see it as a disease and illness that wasn't going to go away. And thanks to being what some doctors would refer to me as being a very high-functioning depressed patient, I was able to manage and hide the episodes when they were there and forget about them when they left. Had I researched it and tried to understand it, I would have known the reality of what I was up against and could have learned some preventative measures that would help. I could have learned what some of my particular warning signs were that came before each episode. I couldn't have necessarily stopped them from coming, but I could have at least been better prepared to handle them when they did and not be completely blindsided by their arrival. And blindsided I was at age 30 after my twin boys were born. Not too long after they arrived, I found myself in a brutal, intense episode of depression, even worse than the first one in college. And it was at this point in time that I finally woke up and began to face the seriousness of what I had not been dealing with for so long. Steve and I were ecstatic to have children, and I had always wanted bunches of them. We got pregnant easily, and at our first ultrasound at 20 weeks, we discovered that we were having twins. We were beside ourselves with excitement and joy. And all that excitement and joy continued after they were born, but once again, I would feel things starting to slip. My body and mind were being overrun with depression, and it was relentless. Steve said it was as if I'd drift farther and farther away each day when he came home from work. I was freezing all the time again, and the weight was flying off. I'd gained almost 70 pounds during the pregnancy, and it wasn't too long after the boys were born that I was down to 10 pounds less than I weighed today. It was such a weird state, because I was so at ease and felt so at home caring for these precious babies that felt so natural and so right in so many, many ways. And it gave me joy like none I'd ever experienced. But at the same time, everything else began to fade away and had no joy. I gave the babies all the joy I had left, and by the time the boys reached 8 months, the mental illness robbed me of that joy too. One afternoon, I knew immediately that I was in trouble, and I experienced what I would later learn was a panic attack. I found myself gasping for air, truly unable to breathe. I was scattered in thoughts and unable to focus. My heart was beating a mile a minute. I was extremely anxious, sweating bullets, and all the while rocking briskly back and forth in my chair. I remember being seated right in front of the boys, those two precious boys looking up at me. And with all my might, I stared down, trying desperately to focus on them. But in my mind, all I could think of was those boys, Steve, and the whole world would be so much better off without me. I don't know how long I was stuck in that crisis state, but by the grace of God, Steve happened to come home early that day. We realized I was at a different point than I'd ever been before, and that I needed some serious new help. We called some people who we knew had been in Charlotte for a long time and said, we need the best doctor, and we need him fast. Over the next several weeks and months, I was fortunately able to get to a great doctor, and he helped bring me back to life. That doctor saw me for an hour every week for years, and I also saw a counselor each week as well. I had a lot of work to do. I knew next to nothing about depression and mental illness, but I could barely function, much less read. So Steve took over on that duty, and we eventually got up to speed on all kinds of fronts. I had to face the fact that I had a mental illness, that it was real, that it wasn't going to go away, and that if I didn't take it seriously, it would take my life. I had to reevaluate everything. I had to figure out who I was. I knew who I used to be, or who I thought I used to be. I even knew who I thought I was going to be when I used to picture myself in the future. But in reality, who was I? What were my coping skills, and which ones were actually healthy? What were my traits, strengths, and weaknesses? Where was I most vulnerable, and where was I solid? What did I believe in, really believe in? Several years ago, I heard a woman speak who was talking about the importance of being still in order to really figure out what was going on inside ourselves and in our hearts. She talked about sitting down inside yourself, just sitting your spirit down on the inside and listening to what you hear. I love that image. And it's similar to another wonderful image I once heard a man speak of. He said, picture a big pitcher of water being poured into a clear glass bowl, and how the water would splash all around, and it would take quite a while for the water to finally settle in and stop moving. The author said our souls are kind of like this. It takes time for the busyness of our lives to grow still. But once our spirits get there, the silence is majestic and beautiful and very godlike and peaceful when we arrive. However, he also said that sometimes what we hear is so deafening that no other sound can even be heard. I don't think silence is intended to be disruptive and at deafening decibels. That way isn't a quiet heart and mind, but rather a sign of possible turbulent, unhealthy woundedness, that we would be wise to examine what and where it's coming from. Back then, at the episode after my boys were born, my internal silence sounded like a jet engine roaring in my ear, and I had a lot of sitting down to do. Figuring all that out was the most difficult thing I'd ever done. For the next 2 years, I slowly crawled back into my life. I worked incredibly hard with my doctors. I made substantial changes to my lifestyle, and I had to learn to accept those changes as my new normal. Chemically, my mind needed medication to keep it balanced on track, so I focused on taking my meds, seeing my counselor regularly, eating well, exercising, spending time with family and friends, laughter, quiet time, and for prayer. And finally, my years started to go by in a healthy manner. From time to time, people would ask me who my psychiatrist was, and I would say his name, and then say, but who you really need to see is Dr. Walteri. Dr. G, as I sometimes used to call him, had treated a close friend of mine for many years, and on several occasions I had witnessed his brilliance firsthand. After the third time of hearing me say, but who you really need to see is Dr. Walteri, I decided that maybe I should be seeing him too. My first visit with Dr. G lasted almost 3 hours. Along with cognitive and behavioral testing, he and his staff did extensive personal and family history, trying to pinpoint what my illness looked like and why. He was very interested in why my depression seemed to pop up out of nowhere and for no apparent reason. He was interested in my tendencies, habits, and traits when I was both depressed and when I was healthy. I remember him coming in towards the end and telling me he thought I had been misdiagnosed and mistreated, and that I didn't have major depression. He thought I had bipolar type 2. What? Bipolar? I knew a little about it. Didn't have to have the high manic side for that disease. What I was thinking of was bipolar 1, and that is what most people associate when they hear bipolar or manic depressive disorder. Bipolar type 2 has the deep lows and shows some less pronounced criteria of mania, but to date hasn't experienced a true manic episode. I said to him, wait a minute, hasn't experienced a manic episode to date, as in I can still have one? I thought that if I was going to have a manic phase, it would have happened years ago. To which he said, no, my dear, you are one of the lucky ones. So far you haven't had one, but I think you're like a ticking time bomb, and I don't want to wait until you do. The reality of his words sunk in, and it scared me to death, because I had seen firsthand with an extended family member how massive the destruction could be when the mania went untreated. We changed medicines and treated my mental illness now as a mood disorder, not just major depression. For the next several years, I was stable, healthy, and free of any symptoms. Prior to seeing Dr. G and the change of medicine, rarely have I gone more than a year and a half or so without some level of a depressive episode. I began learning how to trust that if I continued to work hard to take care of myself, I could lead a full, healthy, and joy-filled life. Even though I knew the disease was there, it was on the sidelines where it could and should be. I even reached a point where so much time had gone by since any episodes that I actually forgot just how bad the illness can be. Then at age 37, out of nowhere, our lives hit a huge amount of stress, surrounding extended family members. Everyone experiences stress, but I have to be aware that intense stress has the capacity to exaggerate the symptoms of a mental illness and can alter my mind chemically much faster than the average person. As the outside stress grew more intense, I slowly found my brain becoming more and more noisy. And for me, that meant that I felt like all my thoughts were racing through my mind, churning quickly and ruminating over and over again. And all those thoughts were continually competing for my immediate attention. Yet at the very same time, I was completely unable to focus and grab a hold of any of them. And my sleep was also starting to get all messed up. It became erratic, but sometimes I didn't feel tired. However, gradually, that state moved to a different one, where my mind and body began to shut down, both cognitively and physically. And after a day or so in that phase, out of nowhere, I felt like I had literally slammed into a brick wall. I couldn't move. I couldn't process. I could barely make it to the phone to call Steve or a friend, and the only word I could utter when I got there was help. I am so incredibly fortunate to have a very strong support system, and help soon arrived. I increased the frequency of my counseling sessions, and Dr. G increased medicines that I was currently on and added some new ones. One of the medicines had the potential to send you into a manic state if not carefully administered and monitored. I told Dr. Walteri that I was sleeping most of the day while the boys were at school, and the thought of unloading the dishwasher or doing a load of laundry was debilitating. So he gave me the medicine, and I said, now this is the one we have to be careful with, right? I had taken it for a brief period before, and it had worked very well, but I remembered his prior warnings. And he said, yes, all should be fine, but when you notice that you're wanting to do laundry for the block, then call me. Humor goes a long way for me, especially when I found myself right back in the fight with the illness and needing to drum up the energy, drive, and desire to fight again. Not too long after then, I started to feel a bit better, and I was grateful. But guess what else happened? After all those years of weekly, sometimes twice a week counseling sessions, I still felt deep in my heart like a weak failure when the illness came back. The shame flooded back in, and I felt in the very core of my being that I was a huge disappointment to my family, my friends, and to myself, and that voice, that evil, evil voice had a field day. I looked at myself with all the experience and commitment to being healthy, and still I could so quickly doubt my value and purpose, and I worried about the people dealing with a mental illness who underestimate the power that it can have over one's mind, or even worse, who are stuck in the dangerous denial phase that they even have one. Unfortunately, many people don't seek help for different kinds of reasons, and they often fear being given the label of a mental illness. But we all have labels: mom, dad, wife, husband, child, student, friend, volunteer, professional, and we are all much more than just those labels. And the same goes with a mental illness diagnosis. You don't have to be pigeonholed and feel solely defined by a mental illness if you learn to trust inside that you are more than just a mere name. The same lady who talked about sitting yourself down on the inside said that often when you name something and claim it, you can release the power over you and see that it's not all of who you are. As with most anything, there have been good and bad aspects from having a mental illness. A yucky aspect is realizing that the illness has taken up decent-sized chunks of time in my life, time that I cannot get back, and hopes and dreams that I might have had would have to be put on hold and not come true. When you hide in your life for a long time, like I did with my mental illness, you end up shutting off parts of yourself and many feelings that come along with them. Control in my life was critical, but being so determined to be in control at all times, I didn't know how to truly feel things like hope, desire, longing, dreaming, and anticipation. Because all those things have the potential to end in disappointment, rejection, pain, and failure. But in feeling all those things, I would have at least been living and not standing on the sidelines of my life, missing all the action. Years ago, after one of my past speaking engagements, a woman came up to me in a ruffle of glee and said, "Aren't you just so glad God gave you this mental illness so you can help people?" And I thought to myself, surely you must be on crack. I wouldn't wish this on anybody, and I don't think God gave me this. Yes, He allowed it to happen. He did step in and keep me from the horrific experiences, but I don't think He gave it to me. I think He was right there with me in the pain and wishing it weren't so. Another bad aspect for me is a loss of memory. I was never a genius, but I loved to learn and was sharp, articulate, quick on my feet, and I could follow and participate in in-depth discussions on just about anything. I loved to learn, and I still love to learn, but I now learn simply for the sake of learning and not for routine. I have to keep notebooks of instructions on various how to do tasks, usually quite simple for most people to remember. I love to read, but I can hardly remember a thing after a book after I finish reading it, and I can't remember some parts of my personal past too. Once a year, usually on a road trip, I get Steve to tell me all about past family experiences that I could never seem to remember. I always blame the memory loss from the huge cocktail of medications I took while trying to keep me alive after the boys were born. But my doctors thought it was much more likely to my mental illness going untreated and mistreated for so long. Now, a few bright spots. A great aspect arising from the mental illness is that for the most part, I now know my limits. They are sometimes less than I would like for them to be and feel they should be, or even what I thought they would be when I used to picture myself in the future. But I learned what they were, and by keeping within them, it's allowed me to feel more balanced. I think that balance in life is important, and it's hard for a lot of people to find, but they can still get by. I don't have that option. When my life is too far off balance, my mental health suffers. But life in and of itself, especially back then with the young family, wasn't always easily balanced, and what looked right one week might look nutty the next. So I just try to stay on top of the changes, make adjustments when necessary, and when I reach a rough patch chemically, I simplify as much as possible. Another great aspect and a huge blessing of living with a mental illness is that I don't take my life for granted. Having a mental illness that twice nearly killed me, I'm well aware of how quickly and easily life can be taken by one. Not one single day goes by when I'm not keenly aware of all the blessings I've been given in my life and how fortunate I am to be simply alive. It's kind of like I'm here on bonus time, and I'm not going to miss it. Had I not gone down the path dealing with mental illness and been forced to look deep inside myself and far out beyond me, I think I would have missed a tremendous amount of life. Being determined to live a healthy life makes it easier for me to look, listen, feel, and taste the everyday moments of my life. Learning my limits and trying to live gratefully within them has allowed me to be more mindful and more purposeful, more alert and engaged to both the people and life around me. I once read the notion of us being the closest to God when we are able to be the most fully alive to ourselves, when we are at our truest and most pure form, and I think we are called to try to figure out what makes our souls sing. It's all a process, a journey, and while I am so far from the picture of exemplary health, I do love the freedom and grace that I can sometimes feel having learned to just be my authentic self, good, bad, and different, and trust that, like everyone, I am a worthy, precious child of God in any condition, and that is another true gift. This morning, I've given you a look into parts of my past of living with a mental illness. However, it's important to note that in my daily life living with a mental illness didn't end at age 37, rather it's been fluid and ongoing. And it's actually just within the last few years that I had yet another diagnosis change, the bipolar 1 disorder. And with new doctors, new information, we are all very hopeful that I'm moving forward on the best possible path. And coming here today and listening to my stories, you've heard parts of my heart. Now, hear my words, for I want to make something very clear. I hate mental illness. I don't like having bipolar disorder. I was 21 years old when I came home from Scotland and fell apart on the den floor, and I'm 50 years old today. I've had over 29 years experience in dealing and living with the disease. So let me tell you from experience, get help early. Deal with it soon, hit it heads on, guns a-blazing, and fight. Do not wait to talk about getting help until it seems like the right moment, because there never will be a right moment. So no matter how difficult and awkward the situation and conversations might be, get help immediately. With the help of smart, grounded, and well-qualified professionals, I have seen firsthand the benefits of true, healthy treatment, analysis, and care. That path is not always easy or desirable, and it can be painfully hard work, but it has brought me more light and positive gifts than I could have ever imagined, and I'm certain it can be that way for others. I'm so thankful for the close family and friends that support me, and I'm incredibly grateful to my husband, Steve. God bless me especially well by bringing him into my life. And for my boys, now current juniors in college, and one is here with us today. Maxwell, besides me and your father, you and Gregory are the best things that have ever happened to me. It was the arrival of you two that gave me the determination and courage to get real help, because I wanted to be 100% present in your lives. I wanted to show up relentlessly, over and over again, and be there by your side to support you both. And I realized I wasn't going to be able to do that if I didn't face the mental illness in my life. In my lifetime, I'm not sure I'll ever be able to adequately describe the true joy that you two have brought to my life, and I simply adore being your mother. In closing, I think people's stories are powerful ways to connect with one another. And it's often in hearing another person's journey that we can better understand our own and those of our loved ones. That proved to be true a few years ago when I told my story to a church congregation in Tennessee. After speaking, a woman came up to me and shared that she and her family had dealt with mental illness for many, many years. And then she looked at me and lovingly said, "Beth, as I listened to your story, I finally felt known." To help people that way is exactly what I'm going for by sharing my life experiences with mental illness. And I'm on a mission to share both far and wide. I want to encourage and empower others to trust that they are not alone. I want to inspire others to believe with every ounce of their spirit that there is real hope. And I want to assure them that they too can be known. Thank you so much for listening. It's been an honor to be here. And I loved Amy being organized and sent out. Does anybody have questions? So, of course, 2 came, and they were really hard ones, but really good ones. So I'm going to tell you the question, I'm going to give you some answers, and then we'll open it up to anybody. And I also will be here afterwards if you'd like to come up and talk to me personally. So question 1. If you had to name the number 1 thing that has been the most helpful in your recovery, what would it be? What was the biggest barrier to seeking help, and how did you overcome it? So with that question, I tried really hard to get to 1 thing, and I couldn't do it. Instead, I got to 3 words: acceptance, awareness, and action. I had to accept that I have a mental illness and that it is real and it is a medically proven disease and that it needs to be treated and that I play an active role in overall treatment of my illness. I have to own what's going on in my heart and head. And I had to accept and get to a place where I fully trusted that the mental health diagnosis didn't have to define me as a person. I'm more than just that mere diagnosis. And then comes awareness of what to even focus on. I knew nothing about mental illness and had to figure out what actually do I do now that I have this diagnosis. And I've been taught to focus on 3 areas, and then for me I added a 4th. First one is medical. Do you need a psychiatrist? Do you need medication? Second is counseling. Yes, you do need counseling. Counseling can help explain and give you tools that you will never be able to have learned on your own. A lot of times we've created coping mechanisms that aren't healthy and we need to be redirected. And then practical with the eating, the exercising, the nutrition, the sleep, for me especially. And then for the 4th one that I added is spiritual. I've got to tend to that. So I had to become a student of my disease and break those 3 and 4 areas down to even more specific things that apply to me. And I learned the warning signs and triggers of what might be coming. My aim was to catch the episodes onset sooner and not fall as far, and have a softer landing than you would have without the awareness of things to focus on. And then the action. I go back to those fundamentals and basic self-care. And I try to build these ahead of time. So I refocus, figure out what might be needing extra attention, and put a plan in place so when episodes reoccur, then I'm a little better prepared. For me, there are a few that are really, really key. Sleep, like I said, nutrition, exercise, the medicine, and the counseling. I simplify, I lower my expectations of myself, and I lean into my support team. When I'm giving proper attention to all my areas of illness, I have a shot at leaving a healthy and great life, opportunity to live my life with hope, and all of those words empower the definition of hope. And I truly trust that hope means hold on, pain ends. The barriers. My biggest barrier to seeking help was simply being uneducated. That mental illnesses are real, they are powerful, and they can be destructive. I was completely unaware of my family's genetics. I was completely misinformed that mental illness was actually not a condition of choice. Being uneducated and misinformed can create shame, and it silenced me for years. I lived in fear, and that's not a great way to live. The second question has a bunch of questions. It's a great one, and it goes to some of what I've talked about. It's how do you create your identity after a relapse, and how do you separate your own personhood from the illness? And for me, how do you go forward when you know that an episode can derail the life you have built, and how do you turn hopelessness into hope? So all of these great many questions within this main question, for me, made me think of the word foundation. Meaning, what does my overall health foundation look like? What do I have in place that can help me trust that if and when the pain comes, I'll have a softer place to land on? And I'm right away looking back at those 3 words: the acceptance, the awareness, and the action. I had to learn to accept and trust, like I've said before, that I'm more than just a mere name. And as far as re-establishing my identity, it was a bit less reinventing and more reacclimating. So you create that foundation before it happens and trust that that foundation is actually something really beautiful. You just need to help yourself get back to it. And you're going to have a bunch of new tools that you've learned. And because you become a student of your illness and understand that it's not a choice, You can trust that it's just a part of you and not all of you. Regarding how to move forward after an episode can derail you, for me, it's about the feeling of empowering myself, knowing I have an action plan, knowing I'll be better prepared should an episode come back. And it's choosing a different definition of the word fear. Fear sometimes can mean of course I forget my words. Forget everything and run. So fear can mean forget everything and run. But I read a new one recently, and it's face everything and rise. So I don't live in fear with the first definition. I try to live with fear on the second. And how do you turn hopelessness into hope? This goes for any kind of hope, not just surrounding mental illness. Life can be hard, and pain will come to us in varying degrees. It's not a competition. Pain is pain. It's more what you do with it that matters. By accepting the awareness and preparation that you hopefully have, you won't fall as far, and it'll be a much softer landing, like I said before. Pain can teach us if we let it, and you'll become armed with even more coping skills for life. I've experienced and learned to trust that if I lean into God, if I show up, He will show up too. Hold on, pain ends. And those are the two pre-questions. So we can open it up to questions here. Don't feel pressure.
You might have any cards if you don't have a question. Beth, tell me, you know, doctor ever do post-trauma therapy? Because a lot of times triggers can trigger depression and trigger those episodes. I was diagnosed with, in the 80s, we were all diagnosed with bipolar.
Yes.
And a lot of it, you know, we've come a long way. You know, science has come a long way of not diagnosing everybody with bipolar because our lifestyles at home are much different than the generation before us. You know, there's a whole different world of technology and lots of activity and not a lot of, you know, not everybody was brought up in a calm home.
Right.
You're not making up calm children, you know what I mean?
Right.
So, back to the question, did you ever try trauma therapy? Once I got trauma therapy, the depression episodes ended. Although I still have other stuff going on, medicine made me very, very sick. And the first time I took it, I felt this connection from God. And I had that connection built here with the Holy Spirit that kept me, you know? So that, again, is another one of my fears of prior or naturopathic methods, or that stuff, what your thoughts were on it. Thanks for being here.
Oh, thank you. That's a great question. I have not tried the trauma therapy. I'm not familiar with it. I can tell you with medications, a lot of times the first tries won't work, and the side effects can be really hard to deal with. For me, medication with my disorder is critical. It just is. And I think people sometimes feel like the medication is more of a crutch and that they won't really be themselves. And sometimes it just gives you the chance to even breathe and then go to the counselor. I don't know about the trauma therapy, so, and then the medication help has been significant for me. The other practical, more holistic things go back to that basic self-care, where it's getting the sleep, the proper nutrition, the exercise, finding things you enjoy, develop your support system, and learn your limits. And I know those sound really simple, but they really help. and they matter.
Can you talk about ways that your extended family and maybe your church family have been helpful to you over the years, or ideas for us?
And that's a great question too. It was a learning curve. We had a learning curve that not everybody can support you in all ways. And there's that expression of don't go back to the dry well. I really think I believe in the goodness of our hearts. People want to help, and there are a lot of people that want to help. Sometimes they're afraid to ask because they don't want to make it worse. So again, it was a bit of ahead of time. We talked about, what are you comfortable helping me with? This is what I need. Could you do this? A great thing, and it's again very simple. When you are depressed or in an episode, you're disconnected from people, from yourself. You have a hard time remembering who you are, what you're about. So I asked some friends to write to me, what am I, what do I look like when I'm healthy? So when I am forgetful, I get to read these, and I don't have lots of them, but they just remind me that there is hope and that I will get back to that. And it's a big preparation again, and I think I'm doing that too much to figure out who can help in what way, rather than expect everyone to be able to help in every way. And I do think this is a good rule of thumb. A lot of times, like I said, people are afraid to ask if they can help or how you're doing because they're afraid they're going to make it worse. When in doubt, you can always say something general, like, I heard you've been struggling, or I heard you've been dealing with some things. I just want you to know I'm thinking about you. That's it. That's all you have to say. Any others?
What would you suggest if you're seeing some of these things in somebody you know, like a friend? How can you approach that in a loving way?
That's a great question. It's if you're seeing some symptoms, seeing what you think is an illness in a close friend, how can you approach them? And the one thing that I always come back to, and I used it in my own life, I say, I love you as a friend, and I love you too much to let this go on. This is what I'm seeing. It's not the helping you, and I love you too much to stand by. And then it's gentle nudges of getting them eating, getting them exercising, doing certain things, and hoping that they'll get to the realization that they need the help. But that's one of my biggest things, and it's worked on in several occasions, just saying, I wouldn't be your close friend if I didn't speak up. I love you too much to watch it. This is not you. You're more than this. So let me help. Does that help? I think we're almost out of time. And I will be here if there are any other questions. And Amy knows how to reach me. If you feel like shooting an email, I'm happy to reply that way too. Thank y'all for being here.
And please do take a moment to fill out the evaluation form. That's really going to help us a lot as we plan speakers. That will help us as we go forward and plan other speakers to come in. And feel free to take your resource page as well. Thank you so much.